Okay, good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Hi. So I'm going to start up now, and if there's a few people coming in, that's fine. So a reminder to, if you can, for everyone to, unless you want to chat, by all means, love to hear people on the phone. Just hit a *6 or use your mute on your phone just for background noise. But otherwise, I'm hoping we'll have some interaction here as well. And also, if you feel comfortable putting in where you're calling from, that would be great. Give me some context, either, it doesn't matter, company, place, whatever, because I know we're in a number of different provinces. So hello, Digby. So we are going to talk about a very big topic today. So teams. How do we actually talk about teams in 45 minutes, in 2 sessions of 45 minutes? So it's a big topic. I hope we can get at least some thoughts around it. I wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for teams, and it wasn't for the teams wanting to be better, and also teams that are struggling a little bit, which is pretty standard, par for the course. So we're going to walk through some stuff today. Well, I'm not sure exactly how far we're going to get. Hold on, I got to get my technology working here again. Here we go. So we'll see how far we get. There's some elements that I know are going to go to the next, but I'm not quite sure where we're going to end up today, depending on how quickly we go. So in terms of what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about what is a team, what are some stages of team development. And a lot of these things you guys might have seen before, but it's really worth looking at and seeing where you are today, because things are so fluid. And even just when I talk about change, which I think is another topic we're going to be talking about, you know, is it now change or is it evolution? Is it change is so common and teams are changing and people are coming in and going out of teams every time they do, it shifts. So where are you now, right at this particular moment? What is a high performing team? We hear about that all the time. What is it? And I want you guys kind of look at it, and you can look at it after the fact as well, but just kind of start looking at, so what are we and what elements are really lacking in our team, and what are some things that we could shift or try to do differently. So if nothing else, one thing I want you to walk away with today, just one thing that you could shift a little bit as a leader or as a part of a team that can make it more high performing or working towards high performing. Trust is absolutely everything in teams. When you see trust being diminished or lost, it can significantly impact a team. And we'll talk about that, which is one significant piece. Conflict is another one that plays in teams dramatically. And so we're going to try to tackle a little bit of those today. And then what's your role in this whole process? So how does this play out? We'll weave that into the conversation today and for the next time. So in terms of your team, now you can, if you're comfortable, you could tell everybody, but if not, you can also send in the chat function just to me directly. Just what would be 1 or 2 words or phrases or a phrase or something that you would use to describe your team? And if you're not comfortable sharing or sending it to me directly, that's fine, in the chat box or speaking up. It's something I want you to think about. What's 1 or 2 words? So I'm going to just give you about 10 or 15 seconds of silence here so you can come up with that, even if it's just in your head or if you have some team members there. How would you describe your team? Some positive ones coming in there. So I've got talented, multi-talented from someone. I've got cooperative. I've got one, my work family. That's excellent. Love hearing that. So, and again, some of these are, you know, again, you could have a work family today and something could shift, and it could also make it a little less of a work family or more of a challenging work family. As we all know, that can happen. So thinking about where you are right now, even just having this conversation and asking all of your team members, what would be 1 or 2 words you describe it? Maybe what's something that works really well, and maybe what's a description where we could be a little bit better would be helpful as well. So start thinking about what that looks like. So what's happening here? Send me a note or feel free to pipe up. Who gets to see these guys anyway? Anyone get to see this? St. John's, Newfoundland, we don't get to see the geese, sadly. flying. So this sort of is an analogy for teams. And, you know, anything stand out what you see or what you know of geese? Just pop it in the chat. Someone sees them a lot. Strong leaders, following the leader, that's a good one, absolutely. And the question is, in this regard, who is the leader? So with regard to geese, and I use this one all the time because it's such a great analogy. So the flock, why do they fly in a V? So they actually can go a lot longer. They can actually fly 71% greater flying range than if they flew on their own, which is quite amazing. And when one of the geese falls out of formation, it can feel this incredible drag or resistance. It's incredible, like just, it's almost like it hits them really hard. And they try to go it along, but then they realize quickly they got to get back into the V because of the thrust behind it. When one of them gets tired, and I've seen this happen, I don't see geese a lot here, but when I travel, you see them sort of moving. You can sort of see the V moving around. And so what happens is when one of them gets tired, they start moving. So what the lead one is the one that gets most of the resistance. So then they'll share the lead role. They'll actually move around and give a little bit of a break to the person who's in the lead. And they actually honk from behind. You ever hear them honk? They're very loud. Do you know what they're actually doing? See if someone can tell me in the chat or on the phone. What do you think they're actually doing? What does the honk mean? Asking for a coffee break. Love it. Yeah, pretty much. Except for it's not the top one, that's the front one. It's actually the ones from behind yelling out encouragement, believe it or not. Like, let's go, let's do it. You know, you can do this. Or actually motivating the ones that are at the top, that are at the front, that are getting the most of the drag and resistance. And then interesting, and this is one I love really, I think the most, is that one of them gets sick or wounded, they fall out of formation, right? So to say one of them gets sick, and then they fall out, they'll actually have, so it was, if I was the goose that was falling out, one of the other geese would actually fall out of formation with me, and come down with me, say to the ground or wherever I am, and they stay with me till I either get better or die. And then you actually go back into the team. So it's an incredible amount of caring. And then they try to make their way, obviously quickly, back to the flock. So it's quite an extraordinary testament to team. And I think, what do we take from that? I mean, what does that actually look like in our world? So God help me, I'll never do this, ever. I'm so scared of heights. So even just looking at the slide makes me a little bit queasy. But anyway, what do we learn from this experience? So we've got the fact that we need, if we're going in the same direction, we need to stay in formation. We need to sort of stay tightly aligned. If we're in that direction, it's quickly, we're going to move faster. We're going to move towards our goal quicker as a team than if we're on our own. And how do we take turns? And we'll get into that now shortly around high-performing teams, but in an ideal team environment, you actually share being leader. Not necessarily the title, but you take responsibility at a certain level where actually you're leading or doing the job of what a leader would do. So you're taking turns doing the hard jobs or just other types of jobs that you have in the team. And what do we say when we hung from behind? So what is it you're hearing in your teams that are actually voices of encouragement? Is it a motivating team? Is it something where you're getting lots of positive feedback or even just encouragement when times are tough? I mean, let's face it, you know, different markets that you guys have to deal with, different economic shifts. And I know it hasn't, I'm sure it hasn't been easy here. I know certainly in Newfoundland environment, you know, from an economic perspective. So what do we need to do when that happens? We also have personal things going on in our lives. We're whole people. We come to work, it affects us. And if it affects us, it affects our team, right? So what can people do to show the caring? What can people do to help you be motivated when you need to be, or actually pull up the slack for you a little bit and do that hard job for you if you're not able to do it? So there's a lot of things we can learn from them. And I guess it's really an understanding of how much are we like them in our own teams. So how do we define a team? Can you give me a word or two you can put in there around what you think is the definition of a team? Yes, so common goal we've got there, cohesion, same objectives. And there's a few elements that actually go exactly into that. So this is one example, okay? A group in which there exists a commonality of purpose and goals and a universal commitment to their achievement. So you have your goal and you're all committed to achieving it. One of the key things here is for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. So you and I can have very separate, similar type goals. Like you could be a salesperson and I'm a salesperson, or new business account manager, whatever you want to call yourself. So we could have the same ones, but are we actually mutually accountable, right? So there's wherein lies the challenge in terms of team. So one way of thinking about it is, sorry, I'll put that one up first. Team versus group. Are you a team or a group? And it really doesn't matter, okay? You can have very interesting groups. And I know working in your industry, there's overlaps in terms of whether you're a team or a group. And you could be a team on certain things and not on others. So let's just walk through quickly what it looks like. And again, it doesn't really matter, but it gives you some context in terms of how mutually accountable you are, right? So who's actually responsible? So am I responsible for my own contributions? If I'm a group member, I'm responsible for my own contributions. In terms of a team, it's shared responsibility for outcomes. So you're dependent on other people to achieve the final result. And I always sort of like to think about it, and it plays into a few of these. If you think of like an assembly line, a true team, I mean 100%. The extreme team really can't do anything if one person can't do their job. So if I'm on the assembly line and I can't put the widget on properly, then literally the whole thing fails. Okay, it's a little extreme example, but it's true. That's what a core absolute team is. And because of that, it changes the dynamic. So as a leader, I do have a group of people. Sales environment's typical example of where we call ourselves team, but we're really a group. Again, not a problem with that, just recognizing the difference. So a group in sales would be, I have my sales target, you have your sales target, and so does someone else. As much as we're all literally helping clients and we're out there talking to clients and we're representing as a team, we actually have our own targets. So there might be a little bit of, I'm sort of have my own interests, here, and I have my own targets and I have my own hit list. So, and hopefully geographies are separated so there's not overlap. So how am I going to work with you as a sales leader or an account manager? So if I have one account manager I'm working with as a leader and my relationship with them might be strained, it might be challenged, I might be doing one thing for them that's very different than someone else, but it doesn't affect the other person, right? So if Mary's struggling on something and Barb's over here and Barb's just going gangbusters, I just might leave Barb alone. Barb does her thing, she hits her outcomes, her targets are all hit, whereas Mary's struggling. So I'm going to have a different relationship probably with Mary than I do with Barb. So how I manage them is going to be different. How they interconnect is going to be different. So again, it doesn't mean one's right or one's wrong. It's just a representation of, are you looking at a team as a whole? Because true teams, they have to have an environment where they work with each other. Now, you could have an account manager, for example, with, say, broking. So you got broking, and you get the account manager, and you got a support person, and whatever. Maybe you have a marketing person thrown in there, like a marketing comms person, and you're all a big team. That could be a team, right? Versus a group of account managers might not be as much of a team. So it's really worth thinking about. And when, as a leader, if you've got a team or if you're an account manager and you have these other people reporting to you in your team, for example, then yeah, if one of them drops the ball, it absolutely impacts you. Okay, so how interconnected are you? It's kind of worth thinking about. And the last one I want to mention is, who's your team? So depending on where you are in the organization, a team is the highest level team. So if you're on the senior leadership team, as an example, then who's your team? Oftentimes when I'm working with senior leaders, you'll hear things like they'll talk about their team, but they're not talking about the people that they're sitting at the table with, which is most interesting. They're talking about their team back at the office or back on in their part of the building, right? They're not talking about the team that's in front of them. So the more strategic team, the highest level team, you have to make sure that that is your team and you're not making choices that are negative at that level to protect people on your other team. Okay, so you've got to be very careful there, because otherwise it's going to get very territorial and you won't be looking out for the best interest of the organization or the best interest from a revenue perspective, and also at the end of the day, it'll help your other team. So in terms of are they natural? So I can tell you this now, it's changing a little bit in the world. I don't know if many of you have kids, but when I grew up, we did not work in groups in school, okay? We did not have people where you're in school, you want to get the top mark, you better darn well put your head down and do your own work. It's a lot more team-oriented or group-oriented these days than it ever used to be. So we're always told to hit your individual goals, right? Your mark in school. You know, there's obviously sports, which are very different. Some of them are very team focused, although there's always people that bash against that. You know, I actually watching soccer and on the weekend, and soccer and basketball, my kids were in on the weekend, and just watching, you see that one player who just won't pass the ball, right? So there's always people who struggle against that real team environment. And are we comfortable with conflict situations, right? So no, what did we do as kids? You know, if you didn't have anything good to say, don't say it at all. I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember those sort of, those comments. So did we ever deal with conflict? No. Are we dealing with conflict today generally in schools? Not so much. Now there's a little more, you hear more about bullying and people standing up for themselves, which is great. So when you deal with conflict, generally though, we're uncomfortable. And as we talked about in the feedback and all that stuff, it's pretty not much our culture to take on conflict situations head on, which are part of teams. Respecting power and authority. So should you question your boss? Absolutely. Are we taught to do that growing up? Absolutely not. We're not told to challenge our teacher on something. We're not told to do that. So it's not normal for us to do that. We're taught to be in control. We're not taught to feel uncomfortable. And in a perfect world, in a team, you are made uncomfortable if you're going to develop and grow. And admitting failures and weaknesses. When we grew up, it was very much a just hide it and move on, suck it up and move on. It was never a learning opportunity, a growth opportunity generally. Now, I'm almost 48, so maybe it's a little different these days, but honestly, it doesn't generally happen. So why do we bother? What is it about teams that makes a difference? So take a second, pop something in the chat, or you can always feel free to chat on the phone too. Why do we do it? Why do we actually go to the effort? Oh, there's got to be a reason out there for somebody. Yeah, strength in numbers. It's true. It's true. You can absolutely have like the geese sharing ideas, learning experiences. Absolutely. I mean, there's so much we can value. I mean, if anyone's worked from home, you know what I'm talking about when you kind of miss having people around. And even if you're really introverted and you don't love having a lot of people around, you'd like to have your like someone said earlier, your work family, someone you can go to, you can get ideas from, you can actually learn from. And when the times are tough for you or you're struggling at work, then you got people to turn to. So I think we all sort of see the concept. There's a lot of effort involved to do it very well. So tell me about, yes, bringing your different experiences. Tell me about high-performing teams. So give me a few characteristics of things that you would see if you were out there looking at a high-performing team that was really functioning extremely well. What would it look like? What would you notice? What would you see? What would you hear? Yes, thinking outside the box. Absolutely. What can you do a little differently? Proactive. Yes, we get very reactionary when we're not in our team happy place, for sure. Anything else? Yes, supporting each other. And you can sort of see even from this picture, there's no way that car is going to get out there. There's no way your client's going to get that policy put together right when they need it if these things are not happening. If that person who gets that piece of paper or gets it faxed off to the company side, or you get back from the broker and you're looking at it and it doesn't get to somewhere in time, it makes a huge difference, right? So being able to work together, support each other, and yes, not be defensive. Now there's a tough one. God love you, Debbie, but that's not an easy one to do, and it's so true. How do we actually be in an environment where we can be, like we talked in the last bunch of sessions about feedback, about becoming better? Because even if you look at that picture, if the one guy in the middle isn't doing it quite right, it impacts everyone else. It could be 3 seconds where that car doesn't get back on the track, right? So how do you actually help that person understand how they could do it a little bit differently? Not only will it help the team goal, but that person will obviously do better in their own job. So there's lots of pieces. So we're going to walk through some of these. Now, what I want you to do through this is I really want you to think about which ones you're doing and which ones you're not. Okay, and again, it's not to be critical at all or to be overly proud of yourself either. It's just to notice what could be something that might stand out that you're not doing. And again, high-performing teams, which we'll get to in a minute in team development, not easy to get to. Okay, and even if a high-performing team is there, it could be changed tomorrow. A new something comes down from head office if you're in a large organization, or something in the economy shifts, or a team member leaves, and all of a sudden you're back to square one and sort of creating your new team again. So let's just talk about a few of them. Okay, this is a few things that came up earlier. You know, you've got your common goal, right? A sense of purpose, sense of goal. We know why we're a team, not just that we're people thrown together. We know why we're a team, and we have some shared goals. So for example, if I've got an account team, I'm an account manager, and depending on what type of setup you guys have, you could have an account manager with a broker, and you could have a support person or a couple of support people, or you could have someone else from the team coming together. We know why we're together. We know how we function together. And we know what our shared goal is. Probably in in your world, or what I used to be in, is probably revenue-based goal, or it could be new business goal, etc. What's my role? What's your role? One of the biggest things I see oftentimes is people not understanding role expectations. So thinking that they're not supposed to do something that they are, or they're doing something they shouldn't, or stepping on someone's toes. So do people really know where their boundaries are, how they help each other within their role, what their responsibilities are? Are they utilizing all the resources that are at their disposal? Here we go. So listening, we've talked about that a number of times. Are we listening? Are we too caught up in what we're doing? Do you actually listen to the people around you? Do you notice when that team member isn't, maybe they're quiet that day. Maybe there's something you need to do to support that person. Maybe they're struggling in something that they, at work, or some new activity that they have to do. Or there's a new, really complicated client that's come in, and they're trying to decipher what it all means from their perspective. There we go. So creativity. We talked about this before, thinking outside the box, right? Is there something about change? Is there an element of how do we get better? How do we be more creative? Are we open to new ideas? And trust, which we're going to get into today, which is huge, and collaboration. So collaboration, again, we'll talk about that a bit too. But collaboration in the sense of working together so we can all succeed. So think about all these now. Few more to come here. So team members support leadership and each other. So it's not just around, I have to cater to the boss. You have to cater to people around you as well as the boss. And yeah, conflict and trust is one of the big ones we'll get into now in a minute. So effective decision making is not always unanimous. Now, do you make decisions, and how do you make decisions? We're not going to do a whole session on decision making, to my understanding, in the series, but how do you make decisions? I think one of the last sessions we will do in the next 3 or 4 months is understanding different types of leadership styles. And this will play into it. How do you make decisions? How does it need to look? And does it have to be unanimous? And unanimous decisions do not always work. I've worked in an organization like that, and it did not work very well. So how does that look? And how do people, when they don't get their own way, shall we say, how do they buy into it? Because if a team decides something, how do you let it go and really own it and move on? So continuous improvement and outcomes, no hidden agendas. So you got an issue, you got something to say, you put it out there. And I always say this thing, you have 2 choices. You either, if you have an issue, you have a concern, you have something, you put it out on the table, or else the only other option is to let it go. You cannot be having it linger. Can you share leadership? Like I mentioned before, is there a leader, or is there not a leader? Now, one of the biggest tests I always say is, can I go off on vacation for 2 weeks? If I could go off on vacation for 2 weeks and my team can function with next to no support needed from me, that we can honestly say is a high-performing team. I'm not saying something doesn't go off the rails and you got to get involved. I'm saying the general work will get done. So if you're not like that and you're a leader, or you're in an environment where that's not the case, then things are not getting delegated. There's a sense of someone's hanging on to control more than they need to. So as a leader has to buy into this just as much as the team members do. And style diversity and appreciation of diversity. So we do not want to have everyone at the table who thinks like us. It's so much easier. When we're just, when you're recruiting, don't hire people like everyone else you have in the building, okay? You want to hire for diversity of thought, perspective, experience. What can they bring in that's a little different? Doesn't mean they can't let it go if that's not the decision that gets made in their way, right? But how do we get all the people at the table with all the different ideas so that you can have that creative brainstorming, open-mindedness, okay? Now, team development, this is something I'd say a lot of you have already seen, okay? So I want you to think about where you are right now. So what does that look like for you right now? Where are you, and where do you think you can actually be? So if you actually look at the first one, forming. Forming is the fun one. I sort of call it the honeymoon period. It's a little awkward for some of us. It's like first dates. Although I actually kind of like those, but which my husband laughed at when I first told him that. But uncertainty and unclear purpose. So you're walking into something. It's like going to a training session. You don't know anybody, as an example, or you're going into a new environment. A new team, maybe it's someone in your office. So say you've got, I don't know, you've got 85 people in your office, and there's a few people you haven't really worked with before, but you have a project you have to work on them with. You're not going to be really comfortable with them right away. You're like, I don't know. I know them. I've seen them in the lunchroom. We've had chats. I've seen them at the socials and stuff, but I don't really know them well. So there's a sense of uncertainty, testing people out, being sort of tentative, asking people questions, being very polite, most likely, or being very quiet would be another way to look at it for some folks. Then all of a sudden you get more comfortable. Okay, so you've got all these people who haven't worked together before, or as I mentioned before, there could be a change in the team, a new dynamic, a new player in the team, which changes things. So you work through your storming again. So you can go right back to forming again. If you're a new team, then to storming. And storming is something, one thing about storming is that it sounds awful, but it has to happen. Okay, it depends on how long you stay in it. You can take a toll on a team if it stays within storming. It will eventually become extremely dysfunctional. But you have to get through storming, because what it means is people are letting their boundaries go down. So if I have a certain style, I'm a natural way, and I go in and I've got my P's and Q's, as my mother used to say, you're being polite, you're being nice, and all of a sudden the gloves come off. Now it sounds a little extreme, probably not to that extreme, but same concept, right? I go in and I start being myself. I start being more comfortable. And guess what? You don't like me that way. We don't connect very well. We're storming, we're butting heads a little bit. We're maybe pushing boundaries. Maybe I want to be the teacher's pet sort of thing. Maybe I'm catering to the boss. Maybe I'm playing devil's advocate to the boss, or other team members. Maybe I'm trying to make it all about me, or I want to be in control. There's so many things that happen in storming, but you got to do that, because if you're in storming, people are being more open. Whether you like it or not, they're being more open. So you have to get through that piece before you can get into norming. So norming, if as someone said earlier, like a work family, you're going to go through stages, right, where things are kind of running smoothly. So there's cohesion in the team. You have a sense of your role, what you're supposed to do. You come to work in the morning. We've all been there. You come to work in the morning and you're like, yep, I gotta review that policy, or I gotta go out and do this, I gotta do that. But yeah, your general day-to-day is pretty good. Your team's functioning. There's no major distress on the team. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do. You have a clear purpose of what's happening. Okay, so that's getting pretty comfortable. And to get to high performing, that's when everyone is truly open. That's when everything gets put on the table. That's when there's no elephants in the room. This is what I'm saying. People don't always get to performing stage. Okay, don't panic. If you get to norming, that's good too. But high performing, you often will see, I've seen it in some project teams. You would rarely see this for long periods of time. I've seen it in very sort of quick turnaround project teams, like they get in and they get out really quickly and they're superstars. Or a longer team that's been working together for a while that just hits their groove. But things can go off the rails as well. I think understanding that it's hard to keep this for a long period of time is really, really important. And I think everyone needs to know all these are normal. So if you're in storming as a leader and you're in storming, how do you actually get everyone to start talking? How do you get people to stop judging other people? So this is ones where you can do multiple different things, right? You can get them together. You can try to get them to be more comfortable with each other. I do assessments with people just to kind of get them really comfortable with, okay, your style is just as important as my style. Just how do our styles work together? So there's different ways you can do it as a leader. You have to be able to own it. And when you're in the storming stage, and say, we're not functioning very well as a team, and really be open about it and say, we need to get better. And here's how I'm going to try to do that. I need your input. I need you guys to commit to this. And this is normal what we're going through. Normalize it. Totally normal what we're going through. So to get into a stage where we feel more comfortable with each other and we're more higher functioning, then here's where we're going to go. Everyone agreed? Yeah. Okay, let's talk about it. Let's put those elephants out on the table. Do we understand our roles? What styles are conflicting within the room? That kind of thing. It's not easy, but you have to own it. And then norming is more when things are moving and shaking. They're kind of moving along. So how do you actually take it up to the next level when you're at norming? Kind of keep pushing that. Thinking outside the box would be an easy one. Norming, you can actually become quite stale if you don't kind of jazz it up, make it all about how do we just be that much better? How do we learn from our mistakes? All that kind of stuff. And high performing is really letting them do some of it. Like if you have a really high performing team right now, you should be out there trying to get them to take on some additional stuff. You should be delegating, letting them shine, right? Asking them what they want to do more of, right? Taking a little bit of a leadership role. Are you chairing all the meetings? Well, why are you chairing the meetings? Why can't they chair some of the meetings? Why can't you share the load? It'd be a lot easier for you. And it's not around giving anything up. It's around making yourself a better leader, because if you can have them high functioning, it makes your life a whole lot easier. Okay, so where are you? Oh yeah, there's adjourning too. When he came up with it, he just had the original 4. And sometimes teams just shut down, right? Maybe it's an initiative you had where a team was together, or a project team is an example there too. Now, one of the biggest things, sorry I'm doing a lot of talking here today, so I'll just read it out too. So it simply makes no difference how good the rhetoric is or even how good the intentions are. If there's little or no trust, there's no foundation for permanent success. And most people know Covey. And it's something that rings true. When I first read that quote years ago, it just stuck in my mind, because without the trust, when you go into teams that are dysfunctional or are not performing at their best, there's always someone who doesn't trust someone else. There's maybe an element of distrust in the leader. There's a distrust in process. There's a distrust in how the structure's set up. There's a distrust there of something, okay? And again, it's hard to have perfect trust. So I want you to think about 2 people, one that you trust and one that you don't. And just put in the chat or speak up, what is the difference? Tell me something that would be different between the 2. Let's see. Okay, so believing their abilities, competitiveness. Yes, less worry. That's an interesting one. I really like that, actually. Less worry for the one that we trust. So there's a little, probably with calmer, it's probably a little more comforting environment. You'll hand off more to the one that you trust. Yes. And it's funny, we're not getting into delegation here today, but that's a huge one. We think we don't trust people, so we won't give it to them. So if you actually look at trust and distrust, I'll give you some ideas in that. Now, I have another formula I'll show you afterward, but the context of team building, trust is the confidence among team members that their peers' intentions are good. Okay, so people are coming in good intentions, and that there's no reason to be careful around the group. So when you said less worry, that really struck home for me. Do I need to be careful? Do I need to cater to I keep saying Mary. I don't actually have a colleague now named Mary, but I'm just going to use it for fun. So actually there is a Mary. Sorry, Mary McDonald. So if I don't trust Mary, I'm going to go in, or if I'm scared she's going to do something, she's going to get really aggressive, or she's going to do something around the table, then yeah, I'm going to be really careful around her, right? As opposed to going in, saying what I need to say, and trusting her to respond in an appropriate way. Sometimes we cater too much, and that means we're not actually getting to a high level of performance because we're not in that trusting environment. And when you think about it, I don't know, you've probably heard of the bucket, right? They use it for different things. They use it for, you can use the analogy for different things, but like a trust bucket, right? So I personally think, and I've got it in here as well, I personally think that you have to trust people for them to trust you. So an initial trust, some people can't do this, I understand that. But if I meet someone new, I initially trust them until they take it away. So the bucket's full. Some people are opposite. They have the buckets empty, and you have to prove to them the bucket to be full. As a leader, though, think about how do you go in trusting first. Set up the parameters so that you can delegate, you can work with people. So trusting your team, unless something happens, and then you sit back and you readjust. And maybe the bucket's gone a little bit down in trust, but how do you actually readjust as a leader? So it's hard when it's violated, though. If you find trust is gone, come on, in your entire career, everyone knows someone they don't trust. Everyone knows someone they don't trust. So if you think about a leader, you think about a colleague, you think about a direct report, someone that you just didn't trust, and how difficult it would have been if I'd said to you, you have to start trusting them tomorrow. Once it's violated and gone, it's super hard to get back. So as a leader, it's one of those things that you have to start doing. So what does it actually look like? So one of the big things actually with teams, this is actually from Patrick Lencioni's work. If anybody wants to know the book, it's fine. It's called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And when you look at his work, it's from quite a long time ago now, that book. Probably have it in my bookcase here right now. But it's one of those things that's really kept going, and people really enjoy this model, because at the base of the model is trust. So, and what that means is an absence of trust. It's a dysfunction of a team. And if you haven't got this, then it really does affect the other ones at the bottom of the pyramid. So it's an unwillingness to be vulnerable, okay? So if I've got a team that doesn't want to be vulnerable, it prevents trust within the team. So team members, they're not open with each other about their mistakes would be one. Their weaknesses would be another. How do you build trust? So if I made a mistake, I'm like, oh my God, I don't feel comfortable bringing this up in a meeting. I don't feel comfortable owning this. Then how are you going to have trust? How is that ever going to happen? So how comfortable are people feeling vulnerable? How easy is it for people to share information with their colleagues? And how do you maintain that over time? So if you look at, invulnerability. So a team that trusts. Now, take a little tick box here in your head, or write, make notes here. Can you and your teams admit weaknesses and mistakes? Because, as said before, in terms of employee engagement, taking mistakes, now I don't mean something monstrous where you get fired for. I mean, just regular, we all make mistakes, every single one of us. I had one that I thought was going to get me fired years ago. It didn't actually, and the way I managed it, actually they thought it was great. I managed it, but it was very stressful. Like, as I always say to my clients, full body sweat. But we make mistakes. Bringing it up to people and admitting them, looking at them as an opportunity to learn and grow, and our team seeing it as an opportunity. How do we as a team help support Heather so this doesn't happen again? How do we as a team help Heather to get over this, right? Do we ask for help? Do we, there's a good one. So we all have our little experience, like what am I good at? What is Heather good at? So if you come to me and question something I'm good at, if you really question what I do, then can I handle that? Can I handle you asking me something? Because theoretically, as a leader, you should be able to give opinions on everything else. You don't have to be an expert to just ask an honest question, right? So if I'm asking a question, or someone's giving me some suggestion, can I handle it, right? Can we do that? Is there positive intent? Do people have a sense of, okay, yeah, Mary didn't do that really, really well, but I know she didn't mean to. Of course she didn't mean to do it. Gosh, she would never mean to do that, right? I've had leaders say, so-and-so's, they come into work just to drive me crazy. Well, no, they really don't. They come in with positive intentions to do a good job, and something about them is driving you crazy. So taking risks and offering feedback. We've talked about that before. That's one, if you guys can get feedback out on the table and you can actually take that as an opportunity and people can own it and listen to it and be open to it, wow, you can be an exceptional team, let me tell you. Can you tap into other people? Is it all about you? Sometimes control and territory gets really caught in the way here. Energy on important issues. Do you get caught up in the politics too much? To get catering to somebody, catering to another person, catering around time because nobody wants to question Bob because his schedule's so crazy and no one wants to bring it up because they're scared of what he's going to say. Apologies, do we accept them? Can people say they're sorry? Gosh, I didn't mean to do that. You know, I know it impacted the client and I'm really sorry about that. Or do we hold on to grudges? Oh, number 9. Anybody here? I want to just put up your hand. Can you honestly say you love meetings with each other? And if you do, I think it's fabulous because it really means, and I don't mean just chit chat meetings. I mean, like, do you really get together and it's really powerful? You look forward to it. You know you're going to accomplish something because meetings are inherently done badly, first of all. And obviously, if you have any team dysfunction, it's going to come out even more in a meeting. So if you do, oh, somebody's got one. Depends on the group I meet with. Perfect. So there are people that actually look forward to some of these meetings. And if you're not looking forward to it, there's your little tester, barometer. If I'm not looking forward to this, 2 things. What does it say about the team I'm with, and what does it say about how we do our meetings? Okay. Time-wise, let me check time. Oh my gosh, time just flies. All right. So in terms of role of the leader, in terms of, so trust, we've got different elements of trust. And I just want to share this stuff with you very quickly. What does trust mean? Because think about this as yourself now. So do they have credibility? Okay, so if I'm going to trust you to do a task or be on our team and you're an account manager, I would assume, myself, I would assume that you're there and your title account manager means you can actually do it. So do you actually know what you're doing? Are you credible as an account manager, as someone who can service a client really well? Okay, are you someone who's reliable? Can you deliver on your promises? And this is for the people out there, I'm going to say as well, the people out there that say yes when they should say no. Can you deliver when you need to deliver? Are you one of those people that wants to be helpful and you don't get things in on time because you're overwhelmed? So is there a reliability piece there, right? Do you have that? People who are late, prime example. If I know someone's going to be late, I don't want to talk about my own family situation. My husband's always a little late. But anyway, a work situation, if I'm going to sit there and wait and we have to wait for a meeting and someone's always late coming, are they reliable? Are we going to trust them to be there when they really need to be there? When that client meeting happens and you're meeting at the client's office, is that person going to be there? I'm thinking your trust is going to be a little bit lower. And intimacy is a confidentiality piece. So if I come to you in confidence and I'm sharing something, maybe I made a mistake and I want to get your support on it or understand how to fix it, I need to know that it's in confidence. I don't want to hear everyone in the office hear about it or the inappropriate person be told. And it's all undercut by, is it all about you? Is the person that you're with there for their own gain? Because that will totally take apart all of this. Are they doing it because they're being nice to you just because they want something? Is there truly a caring component? Okay, so trust is reciprocal. It's dynamic. It changes as the roads. It's up and down. And I can hear background noise there if you could just mute for a second who's typing. And vulnerability, can you create an environment that's vulnerable? Can you create an environment at your meetings where you're putting things out on the table and you're showing your own vulnerability? It will build trust. Can this exist? How many people think we can have healthy conflict? Ooh, we have a yes. Anyone else? Absolutely. Love that, Sherry. Okay, well, give me at least one thing you think it might look like. What would healthy conflict look like? A word, a phrase, whatever comes to mind. Yes, debate. I call it dialogue, but yes, debate. You could say debate in a positive way. How do we say an and not a but? So the worst thing you can do in a team is stay away from conflict, because conflict is what makes you better. Conflict is what puts things out on the table. Conflict is what has created our society, our world. Think about if we didn't have conflict, we wouldn't, I mean, heaven knows what our world would look like if we ran away from conflict. As a woman, I wouldn't be able to vote. So there's lots of things out there that have been created through conflict. Now, some of it has been violent and all those sorts of things, but how do you actually look at it as an opportunity, right? Something's happening. You're noticing something in your team and there's a conflict between people. Excellent. Let's get that out there so we can make it better. Now, not all of us love conflict. Let's be frank about it, but it's something that you can't have without it. So in terms of conflict, so when you look at it, if you've got the failure, so failure, you're not building trust, right? It really sets the tone for, okay, so if you're not being vulnerable, you're not putting things out on the table, then you're going to have lack of trust. And you're not going to have the debate, you're not going to have the conversations, which is going to lead to, you know, you're going to have fear of conflict. People aren't going to feel comfortable, right? And it's going to be what's called artificial harmony, right? Yep, we're functioning, but we're not speaking about the things we really need to speak about, okay? So last thing now, time-wise, because I only have a minute or so, I'm just going to run through, and I use this slide all the time when I do sessions, just an understanding very quickly, and then we'll get into more next time if we can. And we're going to talk about other elements, and we're also going to talk about how you work in a team and create your ground rules in your teams for the next session. And a couple of more dysfunctions, very quick ones, not as long as these first two. Conflict, though, is essential. Okay, so when you look at conflict, you're either looking at a concern for self, about me, or you're looking at a concern for others. But all of these, as much as you see the concern for self, it's not a negative thing. Each one of these, you should be able to do. Okay, so we're not going to get into that today because we won't have time because I'm already right at my time. But we're going to talk about how can those each be important. When is actually avoidance good? Maybe we'll start with one just for fun. We'll start with, when is competition? I'm right, you're wrong. Let's do that last one before we finish. So I'm right, you're wrong. When would that be the right approach? When do you think? All right, I got a never there. Anyone else? All right, so I'm going to challenge you guys now. So let's say your boss is, I'm trying to think of something now that relates to your world. Say that your boss doesn't want to tell a client something. Does not want to tell a client something and you disagree. And you know this could be something that could complete breach of policy, completely could destroy the relationship with the client if the client found out. I'm just going a little extreme here because this would be an extreme situation where you would do this. If it's something where really to the benefit of it's not to the benefit of the team, it's not to the benefit of the client, it's not to the benefit of the organization, then yeah, I might say, look, I completely disagree with this. I'm right and I need to challenge you. So it's got to be something true to your heart, who you are, what the organization stands for. You see people who stand up for things in organizations, whether they're speaking up against something, that's when competition is right. You see people who do it for a living, like lobbyists in government and things like that. So competition is actually something where they probably like to do it, fighting for something, fighting for change, fighting for this. So they live in that world. For most of us, it's only when something really means something to you in the organization and the values, okay? So of what you stand for. And I've seen people leave because they disagree with certain things in an organization. So that's just one example. I know it's extreme, but we should all be able to do that if we need to. Our organizations would count on us to do that if something was done inappropriately, right? To speak up and say, nope, I disagree with that. It's self, but it's also for the team. And last thing I'll do, because I know I'm late, accommodation. So you're right. When would we do that one? When would we do you're right? You go ahead and do that now. I disagree with your approach, but I'm going to let you go ahead and do it. When would that be a good time? What would be a situation that would look right? Got to be someone out there that has an idea. And I know I'm late, so I apologize. Because of time, I'll make a comment and then I'll sign off. If, for example, you have a new team member and it's something that's really not worth it, it's like, it's a different approach, yeah, go for it, give it a try. It could be a new client that wants something where, yeah, it's not our standard thing to do, but new client, I'll give them a win this time. Like I'll get some credibility there with this person, right? It could be something that really means something to somebody else and it really doesn't mean so much to you. It's like, well, it doesn't matter either way to me, you go for it. not what I would have done, but you go for it. There's ways you can do it to create more trust in a relationship by doing that, but not all the time. You can't be a yes person and let that happen all the time. But that's, again, a situational one that would make sense. So anyway, so that's where we'll leave it for now. We're going to pick that up and we're going to get into just a few more dysfunctions, a few more ideas. And then we're going to get into how you can actually start implementing this in terms of setting ground rules and what it looks like in your team. I want you to sign off with one thing you take away, if you can, in the chat box, so I know that I've done something useful today. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, everyone.